Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator, and I'm also the creator, host, moderator, publisher of thechocolatelife.com. Today, before we jump into the topic, which is about a recent kerfuffle, might be a good word, involving a brand that I think many people who are concerned about sustainability in chocolate know of, that is Tony's Chocolonely, about a recent legal kerfuffle they've been involved in. What I want to do is I want to remind everybody who might be watching this episode live to go into the comments, whether you're watching here on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and let me know where in the world that you're connecting from. I will get that shout out up on the screen. Now, I can only see how many people are watching from YouTube, but if you're watching from LinkedIn or Facebook, and let me know where in the world you're connecting from. And also, if you have any comments or questions during the course of the hour, you can put them into the live chat replay. On YouTube or in the comments, Facebook and LinkedIn, and I will get to them over the course of the hour. So with that said, let's jump into today's topic, which is about this recent legal struggle that Tony's Chocolonely has gone through. And we'll do that in part by saying this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there and you will find that every single episode of Pod Save Chocolate has a post that I have created for it. Now we're gonna that post has an overview of what the episode is all about, and then it also contains links and other resources that you're going to be able to follow over the course of the episode, but also that you can refer to. And if there are any new links or resources that come up during the course of the hour, I'm going to put them in there, so you don't have to follow along to get the URLs or anything like that. We'll go and I will update the post usually within an hour of the end of the episode. So let's talk about what it is that's going on here, and that is that in a German court recently, right, Tony's Chocolonely was taken to court by Mondelēz. And so Mondelēz is the company that owns the Milka brand. And the original bar that stepping back a little, a couple of years ago, there was a campaign that Tony's did. I think it was primarily in the UK and and Ireland, but there was this campaign that Tony's did where what they produced is they produced a series of bars that were knockoffs of bars from other companies. And if you can go take a look, you can probably guess, if you're a big chocolate fan, of what the makers are whose bars are being, I wouldn't say parodied, are being parodied in this. And this is a post on the Chocolate Life that I wrote 3 years ago. So this happened in 2020, 2021. And they had this program called Sweet Solutions. And their sweet solution was the solution to child labor, illegal child labor in West Africa. And they were producing these bars to mock, right, Big Chocolate in their inability or unwillingness or whatever to address systemic inequities in their supply chain. And a lot of people were going, what the heck is going on? What are they doing this? And not surprisingly, you can imagine that there was a lot of pushback, right? And my personal belief is that Tony's engaged in this campaign, right? And chose the 4 bars that they chose very, very specifically, right? To not only make a point, right, but also to troll is the word I'm going to use, to troll big chocolate companies, to put that out there because, in an internet age, any kind of exposure can be turned into positive exposure. And Tony's is positioning itself, in my experience, in my opinion, Tony's positioned itself as this upstart brand that wants to change everything. And if they can call attention to themselves, then that publicity is good publicity, especially when you consider the way that Tony's wants to engage with its fan base, what they call special friends. Then, this kind of press is going to be good for them. All right. And what will happen is that their fan base will pick it up, the press will pick it up, and all these things. And so my guess is it was really, really spectacularly successful for them, this campaign. And so what they decided to do is they decided to do it again. And you'll see that some of the bars look fairly similar from the ones that were produced, 3 years ago, but they produced one bar, right, which was a parody of the Milka bar. Milka is owned by Mondelēz, and apparently the original bar was used this color purple in the packaging, lilac, I think that they call it. And so what happened was this: Mondelēz went to court in Germany and asked the court to say, this is infringing on our intellectual property. We, Mondelēz, have some rights in this particular color, right, when it comes to a chocolate bar wrapper, and we want you to enjoin Tony's Chocolonely from continuing to sell these bars in the German market. And the court sided with Mondelēz. Right now, this is not the first time in the last decade or so that a German court has taken on these kinds of questions. So Ritter, many years ago, actually took to court a couple of cases around whether or not they owned the square chocolate bar format, right? And there is a post on that topic, which is connected to on the Chocolate Life. And if this is the archive site, and if there's a link to it, it's not here. I will make sure that the link to it is in the post. I thought I had put it in here, right? But it is the case that that the German courts have talked about, intellectual property rights related to things like color and shape in the past, and have generally sided with the big company that is the plaintiff in the suit. And there's another one, which is, I think, even more interesting recently. I don't know who brought the suit, but the German government, the German courts, not the government, decided that a chocolate bar which was sweetened with cacao sugar, right, sort of technically 100% cacao, maybe under some, right, you couldn't actually call it a 100% cacao bar, even though the sugar was derived from cacao, because cacao legally only counts the non-fat cocoa solids, so the powder and the cocoa solids, the butter component of what's going on. And so this is an area where the German government, the German courts, have been fairly proactive in with consumer rights as well as intellectual property rights. And so what you can see here is that what Tony's has done is they've, so with this image here, what they've done is they're mocking Mondelēz, right? So they're trolling Mondelēz at a second level. So they're responding to the lawsuit saying, okay, we're going to reintroduce this chocolate bar. We're going to do the label. It's not going to be the lilac color, which is associated with a Milka bar. We're going to reintroduce it. And this is an advertisement, obviously, and not purple, right? With the admonition that, all that, hey, Mondelēz, all that money you're spending on legal fees, why don't you put that money into farmers, right? And that's a legitimate question, all right? Why has Big Chocolate, and so this is part of, the larger context here. I mean, Big Chocolate in the United States has been in court in one way or another for close to 20 years around the issue of actually solving the problem of illegal labor in their supply chain in West Africa. So, child labor, slavery, things like that, which they have acknowledged since the Harkin-Engel Protocol was first enacted. But what they would rather do, apparently, is spend money in court, right, trying to make sure that these suits are not actually brought to trial, right? So why are you spending money on lawyers? Why aren't you taking the millions and millions and millions of dollars that you're spending on legal fees and spend them on farmers. And that's what this is trolling about. And even though I'm not a big anybody who knows me and knows my writings, and this is not the first time I've written on the topic. I mean, so there is this article from several years ago about the original 4 bars, the Sweet Solutions campaign, of which I believe that this is a follow-up campaign, very, very much. And then I also did a follow-up. Oh, here's the link. If Ritter owns the idea of square bars. So there's a link on the archive site, which talks about this. Was posted by Bertil Akison in 2006, so it's 2 decades old. So Bertil, the square bar of Akison, was in the focus of the German court fight, right? And this article, again, which is just a couple of weeks after this one, so taking another small bite out of Tony's, it goes back and talks about this, and this is really where I started to take umbrage, I suppose, is in terms of my thoughts about Tony's Chocolonely. And by the way, if anybody got to today's live stream from LinkedIn, you'll notice that in the comments I invited anybody from Tony's Chocolonely to participate. I would send them the link to the studio, and I would be happy to hear the official opinion on their part. Maybe 24 hours wasn't enough time for them to engage with me. Maybe they don't think it's worth engaging me. I don't know. But I did want to at least make the offer that they come and have the discussion about this. So, all right. So Tony's, again, I happen to think that this is part of a much larger trolling effort, right, in terms of positioning Tony's Chocolonely, right, against big chocolate. The irony here, as actually, I don't think that most of average consumers know, the irony here is that the Tony's Chocolonely brand is entirely dependent upon big chocolate, right? So while it may be that their cocoa bean supply chain is independent and traceable, right? It is also the case that Barry Callebaut makes the chocolate for them, right? And Barry Callebaut is one of the companies that is being sued in the United States for their, again, inability or unwillingness to be able to address the illegal labor, their voluntary commitments under Harkin-Engel to address illegal labor in their supply chain. It is ironic that Tony's is not talking about or does not mention the fact that their business is entirely dependent upon the largest chocolate manufacturer in the world. And so I find this whole position, while I agree with it, largely on the surface, yeah, all this money we're spending on legal fees, let's go spend it on farm. Let's figure out how to get it to farmers. It's incredibly disingenuous because they're talking out of both sides of their mouth at the same time. They, as a business, Tony's Chocolonely, does not publicly call out Barry Callebaut, right? Even though it's quite likely that some of the brands they're parodying here actually use chocolate, which is manufactured by Barry Callebaut. I mean, it's insane at the levels of inception that are going on here. And what I want to spend the rest of the time, and I think this is going to be a short episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, unless there are some interesting comments and questions from you in the audience. So yeah, go into the live chat or comments on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and A, let me know where in the world you're watching from, and B, if you have comments or questions, letting me know. Do you agree? I mean, number one is, do you think Tony's Chocolonely is good chocolate? Do you like their branding? Do you like their message? What do you think about the company in general? Right? Would be interesting to know. I would like to know what you think. Am I preaching to a choir here? Am I, or to a group of people who already believe me? Or do you think entirely differently? Do you have a very, very different perception of what the company is all about? What I will say is that Tony's is a really good CPG marketing company. They're a single issue marketing company. They've picked up the topic of child labor right? And they've run with it, and they present themselves as a solution, maybe um, the most progressive solution to addressing the problems and actually solving the problems. And I have to give them credit for being, a consummate marketing company. They've done a fabulous job of identifying a problem and marketing around that problem and getting hundreds of, at least 100,000 special friends, people around the globe buying their chocolate because they firmly believe that by buying Tony's chocolate, they're helping farmers, right? But is that in fact the case, right? How much is Tony's actually helping farmers? A really, really important question. And if you listen or just only read their marketing, I think you come away, most people would come away with the fact that they're doing a fantastic job. They are improving the lives and livelihoods of farmers everywhere, cocoa farmers anywhere. And in fact, I want to challenge that case. So what I'm going to suggest you do afterwards is go and read this 4 bars too far post. It's not that long. Read the follow-up with the taking another bite out of Tony's article, just, to get my idea of the follow-up. And again, remind, these were written 3 years ago, right? But then what I want to do is I want to talk about these 2 images. So this image here is from Tony's 2022-2023, what they call their FAIR report. Now I have is it a transparency report? Is it a sourcing report? Other, like Uncommon calls theirs a transparency report. I believe Dandelion calls theirs a sourcing report. So this is what Tony's calls their FAIR report. And one of the challenges I have with the word fair, well, actually I have 2 challenges, is number one, who decides what's fair? Right. So obviously Tony's is the arbiter of what is fair here in their FAIR report. That makes sense. But right, the word fair here carries with it an enormous amount of freight linguistically. So if I'm calling this fair, right, I'm presenting the information in a way that I want to ensure that the readers, right, come away with it at a very, very specific response. And I am loading the response. Before people even begin, right? So I have a real challenge with this being called the FAIR report. Now, if you want to go look at the entire reports, there is a link in the post to the page where all of Tony's past reports are. And I think it's interesting, especially it is for me to go and talk about the reports. And the reason why I want to talk about the reports is I really want to focus in on a couple of key numbers. And what I want to do is I want to focus on the fact that the numbers are reported differently, right? And from report to report, the numbers are reported differently. And they're reported in this really, instantly recognizable visual style from the colors and the blockiness, right? But it's also very distracting visually. People who have heard me talk about this know that I'm a huge fan of the work of a gentleman by the name of Edward Tufte, specifically his book, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, and his follow-on books. But VDQI, I was first exposed to in the early 1980s, shortly after it was released, and it changed the way I think about infographics and visualizations of information, especially in terms of the amount of visual cruft. And visual cruft is all this stuff in here that gets in the way of your actually figuring out what this is about. So I look at this and what jumps out at me, 9 and 6, right? And all these things, and my eye goes bing, bang, bang all over this page, right? And I'm trying to figure out what this report is actually trying to tell me. And I think that's the goal. The goal here is to visually obfuscate, right, what it is that's going on, right? And make it harder to tell what's going on, right? And this is, I think, a key. Before that, what I want to do is a really long comment. I haven't had a chance to read all of it in advance. Hello from Boston. Hey, Victoria, thank you very much for connecting. I don't personally believe in purity tests. I don't feel that the quality of Tony's is where their value is. So I'm gonna suggest that maybe what you think were their values as a company, that the quality of the chocolate does not reflect the values of the company. I would agree with you. Um, all right. I appreciate more than anything how much they have done by centering their brand on sourcing traceability. Okay. I understand where you're coming there. They're centering the brand. Actually, they're centering their brand about paying money to farmers, right? And one way they have to do that, um, and one way they do that is through traceabilities. And perhaps people might know, and I don't necessarily know that all Tony's consumers know about their open chain, right? Um, but what we need to consider, right, is, and I'm going to get to that. So it's good that you bring it up. Thank you very much for reminding me. But yes, where I believe that Tony's has been very, very successful, right, is in making more people aware of the fact that there are serious inequities in the supply chain when it comes to cocoa and chocolate. Right. However, as I pointed out to begin with, I think that Tony's is speaking out of both sides of their mouth at the same time. They are entirely dependent upon the manufacturing economies of scale. Barry Calabout, let me get rid of this so you can see me talk. They're entirely dependent upon the manufacturing economies of scale of Barry Calabout, and so they can't call Barry Calabout out as a company, right? And so they're trying to say we're the greatest thing from sliced bread when it comes to this kind of thing. And they have been extremely successful around marketing around this single issue, right? But like many NGOs, their entire existence is dependent upon the problem that they're trying to solve. And so, what if, assuming that Tony's is instrumental in addressing challenges of illegal labor in the supply chain in West Africa, where do they pivot, right? And maybe they will, maybe they're going to be able to. I don't know the answer to that. Some hints around deforestation in some of their messaging, and maybe they can go there. But we'll figure that out, right? And because I don't know the answer to that question, but there are very, very good questions. I do tasting events and educational presentation. I get more people who ask insightful questions about cocoa labor issues because Tony was able to get this set up as an issue in their minds. Absolutely. I think that if Tony's has done a good job, that is it. It is bringing attention to it. What I dislike, however, the way they present their quote unquote successes in terms of their ability to deliver on their promises. And that's what I'm going to get to in the particular image that I'm showing here. I also want to say thank you to Neil Barston, who's connecting from the UK. I think you're right in marketing terms. There's nobody that's been quite effective at raising the issue at the heart of this. Having spoken to them a lot, I think the business really is trying hard to do its best. But the reality, as you mentioned, in terms of their manufacturing choices, is they would probably have made their lives a lot easier through sourcing through independent suppliers throughout the world, say from South America. Neil, number one is nobody at Tony's Chocolonely, since I have started writing about them, so this is more than 3 years ago, has ever approached me about this. Nobody has come to me and said, "Hey, Clay, we'd like you to, let us talk about what it is that we're doing." So this isn't, if this is, Neil, if you talk with them on a regular basis, I know in your editorial work that you do, hey, the invitation is out there. I would love to have this conversation with them. I don't think that Tony's would be successful if they sourced from South America, right? Because the issue of illegal child labor is not as present in South Africa. The problem in large scale is in West Africa, and mostly in two countries, Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, right? Is where there are large scale issues. And we can talk about, why that is the case. I mean, maybe it is the case that we need to solve endemic poverty, which might have to do with desertification and long-term issues in Burkina Faso and Mali, which make it okay for parents to say, let's send our kids to a cocoa farm in Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana. Maybe, it's not. So there's something other than cocoa, right? Is endemic poverty in sub-Saharan Africa, which is a contributor to this. And we're not going to solve the problem on the cacao farms unless we also address the larger issue, in my opinion, the larger issue of endemic poverty throughout the region. We'll get there, but Tony's would not be nearly successful is if they set up shop in South America. And I don't believe that there's another company in the world that would be able to reach the level of manufacturing economies of scale other than Barry Callebaut. I mean, this chocolate is made on a production line in Visa in Belgium. It goes into trucks and it gets shipped into the Netherlands, where Tony's actually does own 2 factories, but those factories are about depositing the chocolate bars. They're not about making the chocolate. The cocoa butter is pressed at Barry Callebaut factories in West Africa. All right, and then it is shipped along with cocoa beans, or maybe on the same ship, or could be in different ships in different containers. But the cocoa butter is shipped to Belgium as well. Now, there is, my understanding is, a completely separate, so the beans used, or all the ingredients used for Tony's chocolates products are kept separate from all of the other inputs and for all of the other Callebaut products that are manufactured in the facility in Belgium, in Visa, where I visited, although I didn't get a chance to see behind the scenes when I was there. And what they'll do is they'll shut down the line, they'll completely clean the line, they'll run all of the Tony's products and ship them off to Tony's, and then they'll shut down the line again and clean it. So the cocoa bean and ingredient component is 100% traceable and independent from what has been represented to me from everything else that Barry Callebaut does. Right. So in that respect, Tony's is being 100% upfront about what they're doing, but they're not upfront about the manufacturing relationship with Callebaut. There is a footnote buried on page like 150 of this report, right, that talks about they're re-engaging in a long-term manufacturing agreement. Now, I think that Tony's had hoped to move their manufacturing to the port of Zaandam, actually the port of Amsterdam. They were going to build a factory, and it was going to have a roller coaster in it. So they're going to make it a theme park and factory at the same time. I think that that was delayed because of COVID, and then I think Tony's decided to abandon it. And it would turn out that it would be very, very expensive for Tony's to be able to replicate the manufacturing capabilities of Barry Callebaut in a factory of their own at a price which would enable them to keep the margins that they currently enjoy. But let's get back to this image if we possibly can. But it's a great point. I mean, both Neil and Victoria, absolutely. If Tony's has been successful, it has been successful. They've been more successful than any other individual chocolate company in terms of raising the issue of illegal labor in the supply chain to not just the American public, but the Dutch public, as well as in the UK and Ireland. So those are, I believe, the Netherlands on its own, I think, represents 40% of worldwide sales for Tony's. As a Dutch company, that makes sense to some extent. But let's go here, right? But before I go here, let's reset. You're watching Pod Safe Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator. I'm also the creator of thechocolatelife.com. And you can go to The Chocolate Life and you can follow along with everything that's going on here. And just a quick note to say that this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, along with every episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. If you're not a member, go there, click. There's always a free level. And we appreciate the support. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the Pod Safe Chocolate channel. Give me a thumbs up on this video. If you can, comment and spread the word. Share, let other people know about it. Right. So having said all that, let's get back to this. So a couple of things to know, all right? And what I have here is the 2022 report and the previous year's report, 2021 and 2022. Right? And what I want to do is to point out a couple of things. So the first one is that in the 2021 report, this whole segment down here, right, is about the child labor monitoring and remediation system and how much money they're paying in premiums, right? And in the 2022-23 report, this has been completely reworked, right? And so you need to be able to go back and forth between the two of them and understand, okay, what has been the year-over-year change? And you have to manually copy this information into a spreadsheet in order to be able to figure out, okay, what it is that's going on. So from year to year, what they're doing is they're changing the way the information is presented, and that information presented is done in ways that make it difficult to figure things out. All right, so here's a couple of other things. So in 2021, 2022, they purchased 4,000 metric tons of cocoa beans, right? Whoops. And in 22, 23, they purchased 14,826 metric tons of cocoa beans. So they bought 800 metric tons, roughly, more cocoa beans in 2022-23 than they did in 2021, but they went from roughly 100 million in revenue, and I have this number from a previous report, from 150 million in revenue, from 100 million in revenue to 150 million in revenue. And I believe when I do this, they don't actually talk about what their revenue is on here, and they don't talk about they don't talk about stuff, so you actually have to go elsewhere in the report. So they've decided that it's important to focus on revenue and growth and gross margin here. They're not talking about this thing. Well, they talk about gross margin. So what happened was between 2021 and 2022, the gross margin went down by 10%. I mean, from 50% gross margin to under 42% gross margin, right? They went from 100 million in revenue to 150 million in revenue, right? When they only bought 800 metric tons more cocoa beans. I mean, I want to know how that happens, right? So I'm not entirely sure. Price, rising costs. I mean, at retail, that might be some of it, but it's interesting to know. So there are a couple of other things to do. So if we take a look at 2022, 2023, they talk about 17,740 farmers impacted, right? And so what that means is that there are 17,740 farmer members who are registered members, farmers who are registered members of the cooperatives that Tony's sources from. And there are 9 cooperatives, right? So those farmers are just the heads of households. So when we think about the number of people that are involved here, average farm family size in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana is going to be somewhere between 6 and 8 people in total. So the 2 heads of household and children, right? And so multiply that number by 6 or 7. So we're talking about 140,000 people, maybe, which are represented by these 17,000 farmers. We need to talk about farming families, right? So if we talk about that, what this means if they purchase 17 or 14,000 metric tons is they're purchasing less than 1 metric ton per farmer. Okay, 1 metric ton per farmer, much less. And we have to find out, okay, what is the difference between what this farmer would have made, right, by selling their beans to some other maker and what it is they're selling to Tony's. But what's interesting, if we look at year over year stuff, right, we go from 14,000 farmers in 7 co-ops, again, 14,000 metric tons of beans. So they're still purchasing less than 1 metric ton of beans per farming family, significantly. But they've gone from 7 co-ops to 9 co-ops, right? That's the number. And they've increased the number of farmers. But notice it's like this 14,000 metric tons to 14,000 farmers, if 14,000 metric tons to 18,000 farmers, it also means they're now purchasing less per farmer, right? When it comes to these things. So, again, you have to look at the back-to-back year over year numbers in order to be able to understand what's going on, right? There's also ways that Tony's talks about, it's like if you find it difficult to read this, I know. So you can go to the website. I've got this image. You can blow it up and go take a look at it. But this whole child labor monitoring and remediation system, it's like, how many cases of child labor are they finding? How many cases are they able to remediate? And they haven't talked about, you have to go through and look at like what the numbers, there are actual numbers in here, but those numbers are not presented up front, right? And so what they've decided when they go to this report is they decided to put their number. They found 1,000 cases found. 1,000 cases of what? What? There's no way to know what that 1,000 cases refers to, and they no way to understand what cases closed means because there's no description. Closed case in the equals the child is out of child labor. Right. I would have to go elsewhere in the report in order to be able to understand exactly what that means. But when we come to understanding the magnitude of the problem here, this is what I want to talk about, right? Which is this number, 17,740 farm families. Let's really focus on the fact that we're talking about families here, not individual farmers, because I think it's really important that we do that, right? Is out of over 1.3 million just in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, the two countries, right? So if you actually go take a look at the magnitude of the actual impact that Tony's is having, this is years and years and years, right, that they've been in this business. The scale of the impact that they have is relatively small, right? There are only 9 cooperatives, so their supply chain is minuscule, right? It turns out that all of these cooperatives were organized by some sort of NGO. So it's Rainforest Alliance or it is Fair Trade. You know, it's somebody else is actually focused on these are all certified farms, and there's focusing on the mechanics. I mean, the CLMRS is not quote unquote Tony's CLMRS. It was a system that was created by the industry in part in reaction to Hark and Engel to be able to keep track of it, right? And as people who may have seen other episodes that I've been involved with will know, is that if you talk to people like Terry Collingsworth and international rights advocates, there is a widespread understanding that within the companies, it is alleged that there's widespread that they know that these numbers are suspect, right? So, what they're talking about in terms of getting a child out of labor, what does that mean? How do we know that they have? It could be that there are details there. And what I'll do is I'll put a link to my most recent interview with Terry, again, in this post. And so what you can do is you can go to the episode of Pod Save Chocolate or the Chocolate Life Live, the most recent one that I did with Terry, and you can figure it out from there. But it's really important to understand, right, that these numbers might look interesting, right, on the surface of them, right? And, Neil, you're correct, and Victoria, you're correct. Tony's does an extremely good job of, I would say, isolating the numbers that they're using and that they're presenting to people, and then presenting them in a context, right, and in a presentation style that makes things look really impressive, right? But you have to look and understand, right, what these numbers mean in terms of, actual numbers, right? So for example, 17,000 farming families out of 1.3 million just in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, right? We're looking at 1,750 cases of illegal child labor. Now, this is on 9 cooperatives. However, the number is estimated at over 1 million, right? There are over 1 million children involved in illegal labor and the worst forms of child labor in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, and that there may be, upwards of more than 30,000 cases of what might be called indentured servitude or slavery. So when you look at it in these terms, we don't understand. We don't know when it says we found a case, what that means. So is it somebody who's been trafficked? Is it a kid who is working on his family or his or her family farm and is working on the family farm instead of going to school, right? We don't know from here what this means, but these numbers look like a lot. right? So 10%, I mean, of the 17,740 farming families, 10%, we closed 10% of the illegal labor cases. That seems really, or not illegal labor, child labor cases. That sounds really, really impressive until you go take a look at, okay, this is 1,752 out of over a million, that this is 17,000 over well over a million, right? So it's interesting that Tony's has been able to do a really good job, right, in terms of getting this issue right up into the mind share. But when it comes to actually delivering results at ground level, the actual impact that they're having, number one, directly, right, in their supply chain is relatively small compared with the overall problem. And it doesn't look like they've been all that successful, in my opinion, right, at being able to convince the rest of the industry to do the same, right? And that's one of the reasons why, right, at least Tony's in the past has said, listen, one of the reasons why we want to work with Barry Callebaut is we think we can, from the inside, convince Barry Callebaut to be a much more responsible, right, in terms of their sourcing practices. Maybe not, right? So just go take a look and compare the 2021-2022 report with the 2022-2023 report. There are links here, right, where you can go and take a look at all of the fair reports. So here's a link. It's in the post, right? And go examine their progress over the course of the last decade or so, 2012 to 2013. So they've been posting these for about a decade. Do the year-over-year comparison to understand the trajectory of growth. And it's really, really quite interesting, right? But I will say you have to work hard. You have to work really, really hard in order to be able to look at the numbers and find the numbers from report to report to report, and to be able to get them in one place and go, oh, okay, now I understand what it is that's going on. But the link is here in case you want to do the work. For the purposes of this, I only needed to get to the last two reports to be able to show you the differences. But also, don't just look at the cute little graphics at the front of each report. Go into the back and look at the statements, right? And look at all the disclosures and all the financial stuff. And you need to do that in order to be able to get a better understanding of what it is the company is actually doing. So really quickly, Nick Saxby, also from the UK, wild that they have a 10.5% child labor rate in their supply and still position themselves as the solution. Granted, they're way ahead of the trend in big chocolate, but would Tony's enthusiasts be quite so enthusiastic if you put them 1 in 10 children are doing illegal labor? Yeah, absolutely. But what they will do is they will say, we found 1,000 new cases and we remediated 1,700 cases. So we're doing a good job. Also, Nick, one thing that is not clear here, but you have to get it from previous reports, is that there were 2 new cooperatives that were added into the supply chain in the last year. And my guess is, again, this is based on the 2021-2022 report, that if you look at the rate of illegal labor in newly onboarded cooperatives, it's very high. And that what they do, so that rate that you're talking about might have to do with the fact that they found just very high incidence of illegal labor in their newly onboarded cooperatives. Even though what's really interesting is that these are almost certainly Rainforest Alliance certified cooperatives, and Rainforest Alliance should have been taking care of this, as a part of the things that they needed to do, just concomitant with being certified, right? So it's you're right. Right? They've got a lot of mind share for what they claim to be doing, and you have to look really, really closely at what their reports say, pull them apart, understand. I mean, they make it hard to be able to do it, right? So that's the point that I wanted to make here. You have to be a very, 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 very careful observer of what those reports go. And this is why I think they're trolling. This is where I would say Tony's is trolling. Pay farmers, not lawyers. They're saying, hey, to Mondelēz, they're saying to all of big chocolate, don't sue us. We're just trying to do a good job of educating people that this is a problem. And rather than spending money in court in Germany, put that money down on the farm. absolutely, absolutely, this is what. Right, I agree with that. We should be paying farmers rather than lawyers. However, right, when you go and take a look at these, what you have to say is, right, huh, right, are they as successful as they used to be? And this is really interesting. They went from 100 million to 150 million revenue, right, with a 25% growth rate. So 100, so maybe 2 years that took it, but their gross margins have gone down from 51 to under 42%. So got a very close look in terms of what is happening there. So I want to say that this came to mind because of an article which was posted not in confectionery production but confectionery news. So I saw it there. This is where it was first brought to my attention in a. It's taking a while because I'm streaming the video. It's taking a while to do this. I don't know if Neil, you guys covered it in confectionery production, but I have subscribed to a bunch of newsletters, and this is the first one that came to mind, so I talked about it here. But it was also brought up in my feed in this company called Global Data, and one of the things about Global Data is number one is whenever you see multiple articles on the same topic, go and look and see how much, if any, of the language is the same. And what you'll do is you'll find out, is somebody reporting this, right? So they've actually reached out to sources and done some analysis, or is what they're doing is they're republishing press releases. The other thing you want to do, and this is one of the reasons why I have a challenge with confectionery news, is they never link to primary sources. Right. So there's no way for me to know, right, whether they are sourcing this image or sourcing this article from a press release or from someplace else. Right. So what I have to do is I actually have to go and take some of the text here and then copy the text into a search engine and find out, how is this being reported in lots of other places, and then do the manual comparison between them. And whereas what I'd really like is, hey guys, where, in this particular case, the article might have been written. It's not even attributed to Anthony Myers. Yeah, where did Anthony get this? I don't know the answer to that question. I would really, really like to know what he's doing here. Did he have a conversation with anybody at Tony's? Did he have a conversation with anybody? You can't know, right? And if you were to go and take a look at the text in this article, notice it's a UK stunt, right? So this stunt, even confectionery news is calling. I'm calling Tony's trolling the industry. They're calling it a stunt, right? Which is editorial. I don't think that certainly that Tony's wouldn't refer. Well, they might refer to it as a stunt. I don't know. That would be really good, right? What they're doing is we're the underdog. We're trying to take on Big Chocolate. We're being persecuted. Maybe it's a narrative I think that many Americans would understand right now in terms of our politics. It's an interesting positioning, right? But then I went and I took a look at this article on Global Data, and there's not a whole lot of overlap, right? There are some quotes here, right? And there's no indication of, right, a name of anybody at Tony's who's talking about this quotes. So Mondelēz spoke. So there is a little bit more research, but there's no sourcing here. Right, so we took some information from Just Food magazine, right? Okay, so you can go and read it and say, hey Clay, you're blowing this all out of the water, right? Or you can agree with me. But what I really, really found interesting in the Global Data report is this information about investment, right? Which is there's a very large family-owned investment company called Verlinvest, right? And Verlinvest has been a huge investor in Tony's Chocolonely for quite some time. And so last June, so 2023, Verlinvest, which is headquartered in Belgium, upped its stake in Tony's. Belgium, that's where, well, Barry Callebaut is no longer domiciled. The corporate headquarters are now in Switzerland, but it is as a result of the merger of Callebaut and Cacao Berry. So there is this historical connection that may or may not be there, but we might infer that there is a long-standing connection between the Jacobs family and Verlinvest. So the private equity firm, which is an investment vehicle of the de Spielbach family, increased its holding in Tony's as a part of a larger 20 million euro investment from existing shareholders. Now, if I recall correctly from other things, this 20 million euro investment might have been an investment in the open chain initiative. It may be different, but right, there was a 20 million euro investment associated with open chain. Not certain when this happened. This could be the same investment, not sure. The amount Verlinvest, which was already Tony's largest shareholder, the amount of that 20 million euros put up by Verlinvest is not known, but its total shareholding is now increased from 43.1 to 55.9%. So when it comes to the common stock of the company, Verlinvest now is a majority shareholder, and a percentage of voting shares has gone from 50%, so it had voting control for a while, right, to nearly to over 64%. So Verlinvest, private equity firm, now is in the driver's seat economically with respect to what Tony's does in the future. And one of the things which is really interesting that it occurred to me to check as I was reading these numbers. I wonder if Verlinvest has any stake in Unilever. Why Unilever? Because Unilever owns Ben & Jerry's, and there is an ice cream, right, that Ben & Jerry's produces using Tony's Chocolonely chocolate. And it turns out the answer is yes. Verlinvest does have a stake in Unilever, and I think that might help it explain the reason why Ben & Jerry's produce an ice cream, right? Now, I wasn't able, and it didn't occur to me to figure out how much Verlinvest, what their ownership interest in Unilever is. But it is not zero. And another thing to know is that Verlinvest is also it owns, controls as an investor in a lot of big global brands. One of the big global brands that they are an investor in is AB InBev, and AB is Anheuser-Busch, and AB InBev is the largest beer holding company in the world. The brands, if I were to look at AB InBev brands, you go, oh man. And again, when I say Anheuser-Busch, you get an idea about how big they are. All right, so I just want to give you an idea about how big a company and how influential a company Verlinvest is from the investment perspective. Now, it is not clear if there is any direct investment by Verlinvest in Barry Callebaut. Barry Callebaut is a publicly traded company, even though a lot of the stock is owned in a trust by the Jacobs family Foundation, Jacobs Suchard. It escapes me at the moment, the direct understanding of that. I couldn't find any evidence that there's any investment by Verlinvest into Barry Callebaut. There is, in fact, a direct financial connection between Tony's Chocolonely, right, and Barry Callebaut and Verlinvest. So just something to consider there when we think about big chocolate and big money and what it is that goes on. My personal opinion is that one of the reasons why there is this connection between Unilever, Ben & Jerry's, Tony's Chocolonely, which is made a little bit less tenuous than the connection beforehand through Verlinvest, is if we take a look at this report, what we're doing is they're really highlighting a couple of really important things. Number one, 150 million in revenue, 25% growth rate, 42% gross margin. Although anybody who's paying attention to the gross margin issue would go, it's gone down, right? And we could point that to a lot of things. Number one is the cost of cocoa has gone up. Other things, the cost of transportation has gone up. We're doing the best we can, right? But my feeling about the way the information has been changed, the change of the presentation of information over the course of the last decade, is that Verlinvest is getting ready to take Tony's Chocolonely public, right? And that would be why the information is being presented, or the kind of information that's being presented, how it's being presented, and the change in focus of what's being presented. Anyway, that's just that's my opinion about what's going on. And so it makes sense to like get this out into the public and position Tony's more as an underdog champion for this really important thing. Um, right, and to focus on those things that appeal to members of the public. If I'm a big Tony's fan of the chocolate, yeah, if I could get the first day IPO price, I would be very um, very interested in doing so. I think, although number one is I'm not a fan of the chocolate. It's a good quality Belgian style chocolate for what it is. Generally, it's much too sweet. There was one flavor that they did, which is licorice bits in it, which is right. The one flavor of theirs that I think I really it was a temporary flavor. It hasn't been produced in quite some time. But once I learned the difference between what they're saying and what they're actually doing by actually reading their annual reports, I'm not a big fan of the company. But right, as was pointed out earlier by Victoria, this is something that the average consumer would like jump on top of, and I think that's the opinion. So what I want to do is, before we close out today, what I want to do is do a quick. There's one more. Comment to get to. So this is Neil. So for people who don't know, I believe that Neil is the publisher at Confectionery Production magazine, not Confectionery News, but Confectionery Production. I did a report on the story last week with regard to Tony's, which I think gained wide coverage. So it's clearly something that consumers care about. I don't think so. I think that people who care about Tony's care about it. I don't think I would like to be able to know more specifically. And I would, what I could do is I have a Google Alerts link on Tony's Chocolonely, and I would go and see just how widely this was carried. I don't know that it was, but I will go check to see how widely. I'll put that in. But I had to dig around a little, as the other company involved, Mondelēz, was not initially mentioned. Yeah, that's sort of weird. I mean, because it was Mondelēz that brought the suit against Tony's in German court. I believe the last UK campaign that's followed on was actually saw legal issues for Tony's as well. Neil, I believe that there was the threat of legal issues. I don't actually know if there were any suits filed, right? And I don't believe there's any pushback in the same way, like, oh, Tony's is going to pull packaging which they had or product which they already put on shelves. They were going to pull it from the shelves. I don't remember seeing anything of that. But I believe that it was dropped in the end, absolutely, which is what will probably happen again with the latest German case. No, Neil, I mean, my understanding with the German case is that Tony's paid a fine, right? They were found guilty of trademark infringement, or liable, because it's a civil case, not a criminal case, or the German equivalent of civil case instead of. So I believe that the outcome of this is that Tony's paid a fine. Right. They were found liable. So there was a civil fine and judgment, and that they were then required to pull the packaging, or at least not continue to provide new product into the market, and that Tony's in response changed the packaging. So they're still doing it. Maybe I'm not in Germany. Hey, listen, if you're in Germany, I may reach out to colleagues of mine in Germany and say, hey, tell me what the average person from Germany thinks about this particular lawsuit and how widespread it is. But what I wanted to point out today was a couple of really important things, because we're right at the end of the hour, right? Which is, number one, okay, Tony's is a fabulous CPG marketing company. They've done more than any other company in the world, any other individual company in the world, to raise awareness and bring attention to the broader chocolate consuming public about the issue of illegal child labor in chocolate, in cocoa, in the cocoa supply chain in West Africa. Hands down, better job than anybody, right? I agree with the sentiment, pay farmers, not lawyers, right? However, I believe that the way Tony's is going about it is they're trolling big chocolate, right? They are trolling big chocolate, right? And in a way that's likely to be extremely successful, right? Now, it's important to know that the EU and UK, Ireland are the biggest markets for Tony's, right? And I don't think it's any coincidence that what Tony's did is they've done this marketing campaign in the UK, Ireland, in that market, as well as in the EU. Number one is the Netherlands is the home of the company, and so it has very, very broad acceptance within the market, right? And the laws regarding intellectual property infringement are very, very different in the UK and in the EU than they are in the United States. I would really be surprised if they try this stunt. They try trolling big chocolate in the United States this way. I mean, because I just think that the intellectual property laws and the dollar values associated with doing it would be worth it. That said, it's like it also would that kind of lawsuit get in the way of an initial public offering? Would that get in the way of them going public? Well, if they brought it on the New York Stock Exchange, maybe. But if they were doing it on the London Stock Exchange, maybe not. Right. So we do need to, or something in Europe on the stock exchange, maybe not. But it could be that by playing the trolling victim card, we're the underdog, we're the David, and the big chocolate Goliath is coming after us and trying to silence us, and they're trying to hide the fact that they're complicit in this, which I don't disagree with. Right on the surface, I mean, big chocolate, the signatories to the Harkin-Engen protocol, have spent the last 20 years, kicking their responsibility for solving the problem, for actually addressing the issues, under their voluntary commitments under Harkin-Engen. They've kicked it down the road for the last 20 years. So I don't disagree with the message here whatsoever. What I do disagree, what I do have a challenge with, is what I think is deliberate. What I think, I don't have any insider knowledge. Nobody at Tony's has shared me with anything. And Neil, you made an interesting point, which I want to close off here. Is that if when I go around and I talk to people who work for Rainforest Alliance, or when I talk with people who work for Fair Trade International, and when I talk to people who are involved in these on the ground social certification efforts, people who work for Solidaridad, for the most part, other than Nico Debenham. Anyway, when I talk to people who work for these organizations, right, I get the sense that all of these people truly believe in what it is that they're doing, that there is a value in what it is they're doing, that there is no intent to deceive about what's going on, right? So that it is, and you made that point. I mean, you go talk to these people, and they believe they are doing good. If you were to, I've had conversations with people who are representing the Tony's brand in the United States at the Fancy Food Show, for example. That was pre-COVID, I'm thinking. So maybe summer 2019 was probably the last time that happened. And these are people who truly believe in what it is that they're doing, right? They do, right? And that there is no intent to deceive, right? But having said that, as an outsider, as somebody who has, I've deliberately set up myself as an observer, as somebody who's going to be a critical and skeptical observer, somebody who tries very, very hard to look at the numbers and understand what the numbers mean, and how the language that gets used has an impact on people's perception of what it is that goes on. I mean, this is a real powerful image here, pay farmers, not lawyers, right? It's a real powerful statement. And anybody who's involved in anything having to do with illegal labor and solving the problems of systemic inequity in the cocoa supply chain will agree that that is a fabulously powerful message, right? What I'm asking you to do, right, as a consumer, is to look past what these companies are trying to tell you in their marketing, right, and go behind, read the annual reports, right? Read the annual reports critically, not just one report, but read 2 or 3 or 4 in a row. I mean, if you were to go, for example, and look at the Uncommon Transparency Report from 2018 and what they talk about and how they present it in 2018, different from 2019, different from 2020. I mean, it's a challenge to be able to pull the information out of there and do year-over-year comparisons about what it is they say they're doing and what it is that the numbers indicate that they're doing. And the same thing is true for anybody who does this. I would say, go look at Taza, go look at Dandelion, go look at any of them. And it's a challenge to figure out what's going on, right? So be a more critical observer of what it is that's going on. Be skeptical. Go past the headline marketing messages that these people are looking towards, right? Go find other sources. Try to find primary sources, right? Understand what the issues are and come to a conclusion on your own. And by the way, that includes me, right? I'm not expecting you to believe 100% of what it is that I say, right? Face value, right? That, I have some special connection to the truth or with the truth or anything like that. I have a specific way I look at things. And hopefully what you're getting from your continued following of me on The Chocolate Life and here on PodSafe Chocolate is a set of tools that you can use to go out and form your own opinions, right? And that's all I'm asking. All I'm asking anyone to do is to be a little skeptical. And when it comes to tasting, it's like, develop confidence in your own sense of taste, right? Listen, this has nothing to do with whether you like Tony's Chocolonely chocolate or not. Nothing to do with that, right? You can love the chocolate. You can not like the chocolate. It's too sweet. It's great. You love the Belgian style. Whatever it is that you want to do. This is not about the taste of chocolate. But what I want you to do is I want you to have confidence in your sense of chocolate, right? Are you buying this because you love the Tony's brand? Right? Are you buying it because you love the chocolate? Are the two of them connected? Understand. And then go out and seriously engage in small, right, specialty chocolate makers. Go and take a look at the messages that they're giving, how the way they talk about it, and engage with them on the same level. Challenge them. How do you know X, Y, and Z? Where do you get this information? What is the impact that you're truly having, right, on the scale of things, right? This is what it is important for me, and the greater message of what it is that I'm trying to get across in these episodes. And with that, I think it's a perfect place to end today. I thought it was going to be a short episode. We've gone longer than I thought we would. Thank everybody for watching through to the end of today. Thanks for everybody who commented, Neil and Nick and Victoria. Thank you very much. I mean, some really well-considered comments and questions for me. So thank you very much for engaging that way. And to remind everybody that this episode of PodSafe Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. Go over to the Chocolate Life, join. There's always a free membership. If you do have some spare cash and you can support the channel financially, always appreciated. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, notifications, click the bell, all notifications, so you'll be notified of future episodes of PodSafe Chocolate. And with that, I'm going to close out as I do with always. I'm hoping you get the idea, right? That although we're talking about serious topics, that engaging with chocolate at all these levels is something that brings me great happiness and joy. And so I will remind everyone, as I try to do at the end of every episode, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. So cheers, everybody, until the next episode.